classroom, that's the last thing kids want to do. And so I said, hey kids, I want you to write a poem, and then we're going to make a movie about it. And so my kids, they started doing this video. They started writing this poem, and I introduced Google Docs that day. And I'm going to say something, and you're going to judge me, and we're just going to have to work with that. I had a kid in my classroom, and I hated him. I said it right there. His name was Munchie. Does that help it a little bit? His name was Munchie, and I hated him. And I know many of you elementary school teachers are looking at me like that right now, and you're like, oh my goodness, you can't hate your children. But you high school teachers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, this kid Munchie, I did what all great teachers do with kids you can't stand, and you put them and you partner them up with another kid you can't stand, and you make them go in the back of the room and work on their project by themselves. And so that night, 11 o'clock at night, I'm on my computer in bed looking on Google Docs. My wife loves that. And I'm in there looking at Google Docs, and there at the top of the list, because that's how it was sorted, it was sorted up to the top of the list was the most recently edited document. And in that document were these kids writing at that time. You know, back then it wasn't so refreshed as much as it is now. But you could see this poem start to develop at 11 o'clock at night with two kids I could not stand. And then all of a sudden in the document it said, holy cow, Sill's on. Great, right? So I did what all great teachers do. You're doing a fantastic job right now. Whatever. And so I was just sitting there like, no problem, having a great day. And then all of a sudden I started writing the poem with them. And at 11 o'clock at night, me and two kids that I hated were writing a poem together. And it made me realize something about Google Docs, is it actually gave my classroom, it gave my kids accessibility, I guess, access to my class 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because they're creative at 11 o'clock at night. Yeah. And that's why I hated them at 9 o'clock in the morning, because I was up at 11 being creative at the show for the day. We were not morning people. And it made me change some things about how I looked at my classroom and my students. I will tell you, that kid Munchie, it wasn't a success story right away. I actually hated him for a little while longer. And so he actually took my class the second year, and I remember storming down to my principal's office. And this is the greatest principal. I'd still be a teacher if he was there. And I walked in and I said, get that kid out of my classroom. And my principal, in all his wisdom, just looked at me and goes, you know, Jim, sometimes things happen for a reason. And then he smiled at me and I stormed out. I had that kid for 4 years. But the funny thing is he changed the entire scope of my classroom. The creative element of my classroom changed completely. That kid is a set designer in Hollywood, and just a couple weeks ago he emailed me with a script that he's writing. And he shared it with me as a Google Doc. And it was really fantastic. And I think that's a dramatic story, and it's all great. It may happen to you, it may not. But the funny thing is, it's happened all the time. I have so many other kids that did the exact same thing. So let's take a look at that document real quick. That's a nice picture of me here. Back over here. There it is. So this is this document. I love how some people don't read the directions, but that's okay. So we come down, and this is, what's amazing about this document is look how orderly it is. And a few minutes ago, that was not the case, was it? A few minutes ago, that was chaotic. And you know what happened is, some people got on that document and they stuck with it. Some people, they knew the whole process, so they went down here to the bottom, and they hid down here and they started writing. Some of you got on it and you said it's too much and you got off of it, right? And so it's really interesting to see that process happen in this document. By the way, I just farmed out all these things that I'm going to be doing in the world, and thank you very much, so I can have a good time with that. That's just me using you to crowdsource my adventures. But when we look at this document, we're really showcasing a lot of interesting things. We're showcasing struggle, discomfort before giving up, recovery, experimentation, creativity, and ultimately success. Because did you see how it was nice and orderly at the end? It's funny because I do this a lot, and I do this with my students. I actually did this with a classroom full of educators who were going after their credential. So they had to have a technology component to their credential. And so I did this with them, and this woman in my classroom yelled at me. She said, I can't handle all this. And she's like, why did you do this to me? And I was like, wow. It's amazing how when we get put out of our comfort zone, how we react to that. Well, there's a couple things that I think you should notice about that doc. And one is that order will always find its way. In my opinion, I found in a classroom of creative movements and things like that, that order will always find its way. That document did not look like that. You were typing and people were typing on top of you and you were getting angry, so you're like moving your document around, and then I go back to it and it looks perfect. We don't see the chaos at the end. We don't see the chaos. We live in that chaos and we don't like it sometimes. And that just goes to tell you that you can't, how can you have creativity without some risk? And that's a fact, because it is not, by the way, it's not about risking your life, it's about risking not doing something. And the last thing is that fear really messes things up. So much that I used to put this on my wall in my classroom. My brother gave this to me. He was in the art business. And so this is such a true thing. It comes from the Creating Passionate Users blog. You can do a search for it. This is something that I have to tell my kids all the time, because you can have a great idea, and by the way, on Monday, do you go back to school on Monday or Tuesday probably?
Monday.
Tuesday, yeah. You go back to school on Tuesday, you're like, I have these wild ideas, it's going to be amazing. Guess what? You're going to screw it up. It's going to be a terrible blob. It's going to be an ugly blob because you're freaking out and you're scared. You're wondering if you're going to get caught by your administrator for doing some crazy thing. And the thing is you're going to, and that's what it's going to look like. And the thing is, if you let it just look like that, that's your fault. You have to kind of get past that. You really do. Because I really do believe in giving a kids an environment where they can mess things up while building this creative world of, this world of creative chaos. Because from that world comes amazing things with students. You know, the place where they can lose their balance and find themselves again. Because when you get into a classroom and you risk that sort of creativity and you mess around with that stuff, you know, they won't die. They don't. You know, they can go home. I always tell my students, I know you're risking, you're kind of uncomfortable, but you're going to go home and you're going to have the same process. You're going to sleep in your bed or whatever bed you're sleeping in, and everything will be fine. And you won't have to worry about it, because there is this wild nature of creativity. You know, creativity has a way of making us feel threatened. It really does. And, and most people are very uncomfortable by it. They're so uncomfortable by it that in education, you know, you guys know Sir Ken Robinson? Mm-hmm. Sir Ken Robinson did a TED Talk, you know, and he says, it's a very popular TED Talk, where we teach the creativity out of kids. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting about that, because there's another guy, there's a book I read, Daniel Pink references it in his Right Brain book, whatever it was called, about when you go into an elementary school classroom and you ask kids to raise their hand, how many people are artists? And kids will be fighting each other, will be knocking each other out of the way just to get their hand up higher than the other kid. But as you move through the years and you get into high school, you ask your kids how many kids are artists, not really many hands go up, because there's some sort of stigma related to that. But you know, Ken Robinson didn't say that first. You know, somebody like Pablo Picasso said this. A great exhibit downtown at that art museum, right? And it's, you know, and before that, Albert Einstein really felt that it was our job to teach creativity. And way, way before that, Socrates said that basically alluded to the fact that whatever we model in the classroom is what they become. And I think we have found that to be true. So this is, you know, thousands of years. And I actually think that when we referenced this stuff thousands of years ago, that creativity must be innate. I believe this. I believe that everyone is creative. And I think we all have a struggle to get it out of us. And if we don't, we have outbursts and we do crazy things. And I think creativity is really all about that. And I actually say, as a teacher, you just got to strap a saddle on that and ride it. You really do. You got to get on that and see where it takes you. And sometimes it takes you to a really bad place. And that's okay. That's okay. I don't know why. You have to tame it. You have to tame it. So this is the thing. Cultivating an idea. How do you cultivate an idea? How do you get one to happen? And I actually believe that if you teach a kid to come up with an idea, literally from nothing, you know, from out of the blue. I always make my kids do this. From out of the blue, come up with an idea. And then what we do is if you teach them how to process that and mold that idea into something where it has the potential to impact an audience, an authentic audience emotionally, then what you're doing is you're teaching kids that they potentially could change the world with an idea. And I think that is so true. And I have some examples of what that looks like. But, you know, we weren't the first person to think about ideas, and we have to caution you about ideas. Ideas can be scary. You know, Gandhi said that. Gandhi was saying that. But I think what's interesting, if you take Gandhi's words and you put them in the mouth of a kid, everything gets a little bit more important. I mean, I understand Gandhi's important, don't get me wrong. But the fact is, when you have a kid say these words about creativity, then you have to realize, wow, I have to step in. I have to step in and kind of help guide that through. And that's how important it is. But the first ideas you get are not the best ideas. A hotel napkin in Sydney, Australia tells you that. Your first few ideas are garbage. It's true. That's why I believe in working with other kids, so that way other kids will tell you your idea stinks. Because if not, you're like, I have the greatest idea ever. I have a friend of mine who works for an advertising agency, and he has idea nights. So right before they go home, they come up, they sit at a table and they come up with ideas. They all go home and they sleep on their ideas. And the next morning, whatever made it through sleep is what they start to work with. And I think this is important to understand. So I'm going to help you with a project. I want you quickly to look at this picture and tell your neighbor what it is. Just give whatever idea comes, tell them right now.
Pixelated piece of art.